Hey, folks, thanks for joining the Monday edition of the Frank Figliuzzi Show. As always, I continue to be amazed at the guests we're able to get, not only of their talent and caliber and expertise, but the right timing for the right guests. And we're all talking about the secret powers of the president. What does Trump have up his sleeve? What might he try for the midterms or beyond? We're hearing, and we've talked about here, how state attorneys general and secretaries of state, and now we've heard even the Democrats in the House and the Senate are doing tabletop exercises, trying to figure out what's he going to do, what could we counter with, and we've got a great guest to help us understand at least two of the powers of a president that maybe Trump is thinking about, or as they say in the South, fixing to get ready. Our guest today is Asha Rangappa. She's a senior lecturer at Yale University's Jackson School of Global Affairs and a former associate dean at Yale Law School. She also served for a number of years as an FBI special agent in the New York field office and specialized in counterintelligence and national security issues. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times and the Atlantic and other outlets. You may recognize her and know her from CNN, ABC, MS Now, and other networks. She has a fantastic Substack account where it's often ranked among some of the top Substack accounts, called the Freedom Academy. I urge you to subscribe to the Freedom Academy on Substack, and her current book project. And when you hear the title of this book, you're going to say, well, we can't get that soon enough. Please publish now. But the book she's working on is Uncompromised: Activating Your Moral Compass in an Age of Complicity. It's going to come out in 2028. And that title presumes that some people have a moral compass, but we'll talk about that and more. Asha, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Frank. I'm so excited to be on with you. Such a big admirer of your work.
Oh, same here. Indeed, we have appeared, well, last time I remember us being in the same room at the same time, some of us were threatened with death. That was in Washington.
First? Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, that was, did you get the death threat, or do you feel left out?
Did you get a personal death threat? I remember there was the storming of the hotel.
That Proud Boys, right, stormed the hotel and tried to get into a fight with Fanone and other police officers. And then we discovered that everyone had to evacuate for a bomb threat that specified me and Glenn Kirshner as needing to die, among some others.
Oh, I was not included in that. So yes, I feel left out. Right. Wait, have you been sanctioned by Russia? Because I definitely feel left out about that.
Have
you been sanctioned by Russia? There's a whole list of people who Russia won't let into their country and as sanctioned.
I go
it's like the who's who, and so I'm like, I want to be sanctioned by Russia. I want to be on this list.
I was sanctioned by Russia before it was cool to be sanctioned by Russia. When I had retired, and I went with a major company that was sponsoring the Olympics in Sochi, Russia. And the FBI said, Frank, you can't go to Sochi, Russia. And I was like, why? Why not? Because you might not come back. I'm like, okay, I won't go. But anyway, we digress. Yeah. Asha, before we get deep into the secret powers of a president, I want to talk about your Substack and the Freedom Academy and what it is. What's the Freedom Academy?
So the Freedom Academy, the title comes from an effort back in the 60s to essentially create a government agency that would be a hub to teach people about Russian active measures. And that would bring in citizens and government officials and teachers. It eventually failed because of a bunch of turf wars in Congress, et cetera. But I always loved that idea of kind of creating the Citizens Academy, sort of like what the FBI has for ordinary citizens, for law enforcement, but to basically equip them in democratic values to counter foreign propaganda. And so that was the original concept. I put an online version of the course I teach at Yale on Russian disinformation and information warfare. And it's since evolved to cover topics related to the book that I'm writing.
A good segue to shamelessly plug the book you're currently writing. And I both envy and am happy that I'm not doing what you're doing right now, because I did it twice and I know what it's like. And so tell us about, I love this title, Activate, Uncompromised, Activating Your Moral Compass in an Age of Complicity. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, I have to admit, I have not yet come up with my elevator description, but I would say that the book sort of goes in three parts. The first is to understand complicity, to look at how the dynamics of complicity work. Why do people go along with things that they know are wrong? What it motivates them to do that? And importantly, how do you come out of it? And that goes into the second part, which is what constitutes a moral compass. Like, we talk about it a lot, but to break it down and understand how this works in our day-to-day interactions and what things we need to really activate. And then the third part is really to look at what it means for companies to have a moral compass. What does it mean for an institution to have a moral compass? And ultimately, what does it mean for a government to have a moral compass?
Oh man, I love this topic, and I'm already in my head. I'm going through a lot of people who we keep scratching our head over that seem to be decent human beings until they somehow became associated with Trump. So we'll look forward to that. I want you to help us get smart on a couple of things. My attention was grabbed in the last week or so by a revelation coming out of a federal judge's court in Minnesota. And it sounded to me like it's one of these deals. We had some of these at the senior level of the FBI. Hey, Frank, you're on this panel or this special committee, but it's probably never going to meet. But it's like, and you forget about it. And in this case, this judge must have been tapped on the shoulder and said, hey, remember when we put you on I want to get this right, the Alien Terrorist Detention Court? And she probably said, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she has a filing. For the first time in history, the Trump administration has activated a never before used court. Tell us, what is the Alien Terrorist Deportation Court?
Right. So it's the ATRC, so the Alien Terrorist Removal Court. And
Thank you.
this was created by statute in 1996. I was actually surprised to read that because I would have assumed that this was created after 9/11, for example, but it was created in 1996. And as you mentioned, it's never been used. I think the best analogy to use, Frank, is the FISA court. So this is a statutory framework through which the attorney general can submit an application to a court based on secret evidence. And a judge can look at that evidence and determine whether a person should be removed from the country. And I just want to point out a few things that I encourage people to read Steve Vladek's piece on this on Substack. He has a Substack called One First because he's excellent. He literally has written the national security law textbook, which I teach in class. So I was very interested in his take on it. But like the FISA court, the ATRC is comprised of 5 Article 3 judges that are appointed by the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. FISA has 11 judges. This has 5. And I think that's important because, as you noted, when you read this opinion coming out, that does mean that these are Article 3 judges. These are lifetime appointments. And one thing that we might want to talk about is the difference between them and Article 2 judges, which are executive branch judges, like immigration judges. In some ways, they are a little bit more insulated from political pressure. That's the good news. The bad news is that basically this evidence is presented in secret. And so I'm reading from the summary here. A single judge may grant the application for removal upon finding that the alien in question has been identified correctly as an alien terrorist present in the United States, and that removal under other available legal means would pose a risk to national security. And I think where we should be concerned, Frank, is this administration plays pretty fast and loose with who is considered a terrorist.
Yeah, and it seems like you've kind of hit the nail on the head, because what can we glean from the judge's response to this? It sounds like she has questions, and maybe even right on point with what you're saying. Did you see her response?
I did. And so she's exactly questioning that. What she questioned was, so they've received this application from the attorney general or acting attorney general that says, basically, we think this person is a terrorist. All other available means to address this would implicate national security. Therefore, give us an order to deport this person. And what she's saying in this opinion is, I have concerns about the nexus between the evidence the government has and the conclusion that it's reaching that this person is a terrorist. So in some ways, I think we should be heartened by this, because it really means that judges here have the opportunity, and we've seen lower court judges do this all over the place in the country, to really hold the government to a high standard. Now, if this was happening in immigration court, remember, immigration courts fall under the executive branch. I mean, president can, at this point, just fire them. So in a lot of ways, there's a little bit more accountability, but there's also less transparency here. One other thing I should note, Frank, is that there is the right of appeal, and the appeal can go to a normal district court. So this is another kind of safeguard that's in there. And one of the points that Steve Vladeck makes that I thought was really interesting, and it made me think, is that because of that appeals process and this kind of standard that the judges are going to be looking for, this is not the kind of court that is going to really be amenable to mass deportations.
Right. It's a case-by-case kind of a court.
It was created as sort of, I think, like an emergency mechanism to do some sort of like surgical, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to imagine who would be a terrorist who would be so dangerous that we would actually want to deport, as opposed to like.
Well, I'm going through the same. Anyway. Absolutely. I'm going through the same exercise. I mean, I've led joint terrorism task forces, field offices for a brief time. I was deputy assistant director in the counterterrorism division before I went over to counterintel. I mean, let's go through some history post 9/11. We've had real live bomb throwing terrorists. We've had Al Qaeda and Boko Haram and ISIS present here. So the imagination runs wild as to why this court would be the way to go and get somebody out of here, and why we wouldn't prosecute them, flip them. And I hear what they're allegedly saying, which is it could jeopardize national security, meaning sources and methods, usually, right? Well, that happens all the time. We get intercepts all the time that somebody's going to throw a bomb, and yet we figure it out. So what concerns you? Well, first of all, what scenarios, if you can come up with any, do you think might be in play here?
I can't think of one. And I think there's a reason that this court has never been instituted in 30 years. In fact, I think one of the big problems that the Trump administration is going to run into, and probably the reason that it hasn't been used, especially even after 9/11, when you would expect that it might be used, is this problem, right? Because you have the application of the government saying this person's a terrorist, deport them. What did we learn after 9/11? Even the people at Guantanamo were entitled to a factual hearing if they contested their terrorist status, to be able, in other words, the government had a burden of proof to show that they were terrorists in order to keep them there. That was at Guantanamo. These are people who are in the United States. And as you know, Frank, from constitutional law, when you get more ties to the United States, you get more constitutional protections. So even if you are here illegally, you have certain due process protections. If you are a legal permanent resident, you have very high due process protections, very close to even to being a resident or citizen, right? So yes. I think that there are a lot of due process problems here that no administration before was really going to want to tackle in this kind of setting when, you could just address them by prosecuting them or taking,
I mean,
any
a couple
number
of things I've observed over the second Trump term, a couple of things that might play into this. And then there's a third one that really bothers me. But the first two are inherent laziness, meaning let's rush to do something. I'll pick the blowing vessels out of the water in the Caribbean. Could you do it differently? Of course you could do it differently. If you've got the evidence that someone's a drug courier for a cartel, grab them, prosecute them, flip them, take down the cartel. We're just going to blow them out of the water, which, by the way, I saw reporting recently that said it's done nothing to staunch cocaine flow into the United States, but that's another day. You could, let's go to another thing. There's somebody I don't like. We're going to handpick an AUSA or a USA in the Eastern District of Virginia, and we're going to prosecute them. We know we really don't have the evidence, but we're going to do it anyway. There's just this inherent laziness. Secondly, there's a flexing of power that they love to do. Somebody tells them, hey, you've got this court that's never been used. And they go, shoot, let's try it. And so I see those two things, but there's a third scenario. And people tell me, hey, Frank, you're always looking at the darkest possibility. Yes, that's what I did in the FBI. And so what if, I'm sure you're tracking, Asha, all of the attempts by this administration to focus on left-wing terrorism, right? And then fast forward to Marco Rubio, last week, calling together reps from 66 nations and telling them we all have to get on this far left Antifa problem. It's an international terrorism problem. And Steve Miller showed up and talked at this thing. I don't know why, but he went even further. He said, we don't even need violence. All people on the left are terrorists. So is it possible that of course, this is conjecture, that we've got a left-wing accused terrorist, maybe from overseas, that is now before this court?
I mean, it's possible. It's also possible that it is some rando that was rounded up at Home Depot. I mean, we don't know. So what I see here, Frank, is that this is a Stephen Miller special. Okay. There has been a real, he wants to get people out in as large numbers and as quickly as possible. And what they are finding is that every, thing that they've tried is not working. They've tried the Alien Enemies Act, right? Trump passed an executive order declaring Tren de Aragua a foreign terrorist organization,
right.
MS-13. And then they go round up people and they're like, well, you're MS-13 and you're TDA. And they put them on a bunch of planes and they sent them to El Salvador. That didn't work out so well. Right. They, it sort of worked out for them, but they got a lot of bad press for them. So this is I think another attempt that they think could be, what you have is not just laziness, but also incompetence. They fired all the competent attorneys. So anyone looking at this who would understand it would be like, yeah, this is going to be even slower than the immigration courts, and it's going to subject you to even more scrutiny, and it's going to have appeals, and you're not going to get it done. But because they don't read and they don't think about process, I think you're right. I think exactly what you said. Somebody came across it and was like, oh my God, the secret court. And they automatically assume that they can control it and move it out. I'm sure they are shocked that this judge just said, actually, I don't really think there's any evidence here. Let's look into this more. Let's do the countdown before Trump does his Truth Social post, blasting this judge and saying that she's, helping to harbor terrorists or something like that. But to your point, to your original question, could be an accused leftist terrorist, could be, the guy from down the street.
Yeah. So in terms of some transparency in this secret process, correct me if I'm wrong, but did I read somewhere that the judge has scheduled a hearing on Thursday or something?
Yes, she did schedule a hearing.
Now, is that going to be public or not? Because some part of this process becomes public at some point.
Yes. So I think it depends on the status. But you're right. There is a way, a point at which, actually, I think what happens is if the government presents enough evidence to meet this, I mean, if they satisfy the judge that this person is a terrorist and that
and an alien,
then I think the government has to create some sort of summary of the evidence that allows some sort of public process to take place. So it's a little bit different than the FISA court, which takes place completely in secret. And I think one of the things that Steve mentions in this post is you can see that Congress is really struggling to balance this is always the case with national security, right? Is you're trying to balance the government's need for speed, for secrecy, to protect national security with civil liberties. And this is something that the FISA court tries to balance. This is something that this court is trying to balance. The fact that there's all of these different, the appeal, the potential summary of the evidence, all of this is trying to bake in a certain amount of due process protections.
Sure. And one has to wonder, this guy or gal, we don't know, is presumably locked up somewhere. We don't know what kind of due process he or she is being afforded. Again, we're left without transparency. Could it be that Iran sent someone here to assassinate somebody? Could be. I don't know.
Could be, and but this is like where I get caught, where I get stuck is when I think about the really, really dangerous people. If Iran sent someone to assassinate the president, why are we sending them back to Iran or wherever? Let's put them in jail.
Parading them on the front page news saying, look at what these people are trying to do to us.
Right. Like, why aren't we utilizing this? This doesn't seem like the right kind of
I agree.
Mechanism to deal with a very, very dangerous threat. So it just seems like a pretext, and I think
it smells badly. And you mentioned Tren de Aragua, yet another example of where, in the old days, not too long ago, if we wanted to dismantle a transnational gang, we would actually grab folks, prosecute them, flip them, take down Tren de Aragua, get extradition requests. I mean, we kind of own Venezuela now. We could go into El Salvador. I don't. It's the easy way out, and it's the least transparent way to do it.
And I just don't think it's what we're doing. I mean, if you look at MS-13, we had the leaders of MS-13 in custody, and we sent them back to El Salvador.
Right.
I wrote a piece in my Substack about this because Bukele has some, deal with the devil with these MS-13 people. It doesn't make any sense that we let them go.
Yeah.
So this isn't really about fighting terrorism.
Yeah. But it makes sense if you really don't want MS-13 or Tren de Aragua folks testifying and flipping and cooperating.
Well, then this could be.
Yeah. Because what would a Tren de Aragua leader say about their affiliation with the government? Same for MS-13. And we, fingers in ears. We don't want to hear this. So get out. Could be that kind of thing going on too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I get nervous when I hear some power has never been exercised before.
There's usually a reason, because what I'd like to say is, look, presidents like to president, okay? Republican or Democrat. Presidents do test the boundaries of their executive power. I mean, even Obama drone strikes against terrorists increased under Obama. He was the first president to oversee a drone strike of a U.S. citizens. I mean, it's not, if this was something that could be used to actually fight terrorism in a way that, like, I think it would have been used.
Yeah,
There's
I agree.
something that is procedurally, I think, defective, or just the cost benefit does not make sense, which is why most reasonable people and most reasonable presidents have not used it since 1996.
So once again, I try to encourage folks on the bright spots here. A federal judge is doing the right thing. She's going to ask questions. She's set a schedule for a hearing. I think it's fascinating that this judge is saying, I'm not sure I see the terrorist part of this alien terrorist. That's fascinating. But haven't we seen that recently with regard to the subpoena of New York Times reporters, right? The agents going right to their homes, in some cases going to their loved ones' homes and hitting them with subpoenas. And what happened when they were confronted by a federal judge who said, you think you got this backwards. What are you doing? And they
Well, there's
walked away.
that. There's the slush fund litigation that the judge was not having. There's been the no bills on indictments that have been brought. I mean, one of the things I think that this administration and Stephen Miller they are bumping up against is due process.
Yeah.
And they don't like it, which might lead into our second topic. But
yeah. That's probably
I think what they really want to be able to do is just do roundups and just get rid of people, and they don't. And there is, when it comes to presidential power, the president has much greater power when facing the external world, when doing things abroad in foreign affairs and with national security things that are like in other countries. Like, for example, there's going to be very little that, maybe Congress could potentially rein in a little bit, but like the war in Iran is, we're kind of stuck. But when it comes to people within our borders, there's actually some robust due process protections.
For sure.
And I think like that is, we are counting on lower court judges to really hold the line. I mean, even if like ultimately the Supreme Court might, like, as the way the Supreme Court did with the temporary protected status, threw that out the window. But I do think that lower court judges are doing a valiant job.
I agree. I agree. It's a bright spot. Well, a good segue then to the next kind of secret power that's really come to the surface only after the president's disaster of a speech in prime time that wasn't even covered by some networks, and good for them, where he was ready to scream fire with regard to election integrity and security and demand that we pass the SAVE Act and I see dead people voting and all of this. Didn't go well, Asha, and for him. And so what might he have up his sleeve with something called presidential emergency action documents? What are those?
So I actually had to look these up because I think these are also things that have really never been used.
When they had, not for a very long time, and I think you're right. But the powers that we've heard about inherent in those papers sitting in a safe in the White House had to do with things we're all familiar with, which is rounding up Japanese persons and putting them in internment camps.
I think these came after that. I mean, they were created during the Eisenhower administration as part of a continuity of government plans in case of a nuclear attack. So this is like a Cold War era phenomenon, right? So this is where, what if Congress can't meet? What if I don't know when things like designated survivors and stuff like that were created.
Yes, around that time, continuity government around that time.
Yeah. So this is like, we're looking at existential threats to the survival of the country at a time when, our adversaries were, in possession of weapons that could, they still are, but when that was the primary concern. And so these PADs, I guess I'll call them, so we know that there were 56 of them in effect as of 2017. And they do things like, so they're executive orders, proclamations, they're secret. We don't know them. And even Congress, they're not even disclosed to Congress. They do things like authorize detention of alien enemies, suspend the writ of habeas corpus, provide for martial law, allow general warrants permitting search and seizures of persons and property, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, censor the media is one of them as well.
What they're really contemplating is a scenario where civilian government has broken down.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is what martial law, but just so everyone is clear, martial law does not mean calling out the National Guard. Martial law means when the military supplants the civilian government. So we no longer have civilian courts. We no longer have a mayor. We no longer have a governor. Everybody is military. It's very extraordinary and does not happen. Okay, except maybe in times of war, like during the Civil War, there were areas where there were martial law. I just want to be clear that there is nothing in Article 2 of the Constitution that gives the president secret powers. I think it's worth highlighting that because we believe that the president can just kind of do anything.
Yeah, so this is important because my caption for our session today was the secret powers of the president, and I know that these powers come from other places. So, for example, the research I've done on PADs, as we're calling them, those powers are not out of thin air. They're interpreted. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're interpreted from existing authorities and powers and laws. And since we never really get a peek at them, we don't know if they've gone too far in interpreting those existing powers. But they're based on something, yeah?
Maybe, but it's hard to know because A, they're secret, and B, these are all developed inside the executive branch. So when I look at something like an executive order that suspends the writ of habeas corpus, okay, the suspension clause of the Constitution is located in Article 1. Which covers Congress. And it is pretty widely understood that the president cannot unilaterally suspend habeas corpus, that Congress would authorize or create the procedure, and then the president can do it. The example that we have where the president did do it unilaterally was, again, during the Civil War. And even then, Abraham Lincoln was like in this exigent situation. So, the executive branch, some executive branch lawyer has presumably come up with OLC memos that justifies all of this. But that doesn't mean that they're actually, I think, like unless our entire governmental structure broke down, I would assume that we would have an opportunity to challenge a president's assertion of the suspension of habeas corpus. The only way he would be able to do that without any challenge is if, in fact, our courts were no longer working. Does that make sense?
For those who may not be clear on the Latin phrase habeas corpus, tell us what that is.
Habeas corpus literally means to have the body. It is the most fundamental right we have because it gives you the right to challenge the legal basis of your detention in front of a neutral or a magistrate or judge. What this means is effectively the government cannot come around in a black van, throw you in, and you disappear forever. Okay. Yeah. They have to account for why they have taken you and what the legal basis is. A judge might agree that there's a legal basis, in which case you go back to your dungeon or jail or whatever, but you do get your foot in the door of a court. And that's why it is so important. It's really considered to be the most basic bulwark that stands between, you and being, governed by a tyrannical government.
And so one of the things that caught my eye, because when I first started researching PADs, I thought, okay, it sounds like there's this set number. They have to blow dust off of them, and there's never any more. They're just existing in a safe somewhere. But then I read, oh no, we believe there's new ones. Not new like yesterday, perhaps, we don't know, but through what the Brennan Center, by the way, does a great job of studying PADs, and
that's where I got my research from too.
We're going to have an expert on that. We're going to have somebody from the Brennan Center on Wednesday, on Wednesday's show. So that's cool. And I wrongly thought that, oh, okay, these are ancient stuff that, in scenarios envisioned by Eisenhower, who cares? Then somebody realized, oh no, there's more. There's somebody made some new ones up. And so, and we only get a peek at them through kind of leakage in other classified documents that have been declassified. We see references to a PIAD. And that's like, wow. So do you interpret this, Asha, as like maybe since Trump has been president, someone might have authored a new PIAD?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Of
I
course
was
they
afraid
are.
you were going
Yeah,
to say
this is
that.
like another Stephen Miller special. I mean, they're like back there, like writing. I mean, even when you look at some of the OLC memos that have come out, like for example, justifying the boat strikes or justifying the invasion of Venezuela, it's crazy town. Okay, I don't know what kind of like legal reasoning they're using. I use them in my class so that my class can read them, and we try to make sense of them. They are bonkers. I have no doubt that if they have secret memos and justifying executive orders, that they are equally bonkers. And I think we should tie this all together with what you were saying about the president's speech, because this came up before at the end of or after the 2020 election, when all the craziness was going on. So people might remember hearing about things like Italian satellites or Hugo Chavez. I mean, all of these like crazy things, right? Article 2 does not give the president any authority over elections. Okay, the Constitution does not give the president any authority over elections. So if you're the president, you have a problem if you want to like take over the elections, right? Because you have no authority to do it. There's nothing you can hang your hat on at all. What those conspiracy theories were trying to get at, and there was a draft executive order that was around at the time. I forget who it was drafted by. It might have been the Sidney Powell people or whatever. But the idea was that there had been foreign interference in the election, that foreign adversaries had basically hijacked voting machines and changed the votes. And because that then implicates foreign affairs and national security, which, as I mentioned before, triggers certain Article 2 authorities, that on that basis, the president would issue an executive order authorizing the military to go around and seize voting machines. Now, at the time, there were some adults in the room, including people like Rudy Giuliani, who were like, you can't do that, actually. There's no, you can't authorize the military to seize voting machines, okay? Even Rudy Giuliani was telling him he couldn't do this, okay?
Wow.
All of those people are gone now.
Yep.
And now we're fully crazy town. And Frank,
yeah.
We currently have the former head of state of Venezuela in U.S. custody.
So he could say anything Trump needs him to say. Yeah, I think that's coming to a theater near you. I really do. Yeah. What will Maduro say to get out?
So I think that there is, some primordial soup of legal theories, conspiracy theories, something that's going on that, that I'm sure they have developed more PIADs around.
Yeah. Can you imagine if someone like Steve Miller authored a new PIAD? Holy cow. But so a couple of things. Good news, and we need to remind ourselves of this, as Asha told us. There is no inherent power of the president to alter or mess with the elections. But what concerns me, Asha, is that's good news because all of this can get challenged. Both of the things we talked about today have courses of action available to challenge. If they're going to toss some Antifa alleged whatever Antifa is, some guy flew in from England and they called him Antifa. Now, I don't know. But there's ways to challenge this. The concern I have is the challenge part takes a while. Yeah. And so if we're on the eve of an election and Steve Miller pulls a PIAD out of the safe in the White House, that process where Congress says, holy cow, we didn't see this PIAD. And by the way, for years, decades, Congress has been demanding to see the PIADs.
Yes.
And we have no evidence that they've seen them. So that's what worries me is chaos ensues and we're all waiting for, a court or Congress to challenge this.
Yeah. And I think that is the thing to be worried about. Once again, I just want to be clear that all of this stuff is, like, in my mind, completely extra constitutional. Like, there's nothing in the Constitution. Okay. So even the things that the president can do secretly, like covert actions and stuff, is subject to a lot of oversight by Congress. So this is already very anti-democratic and very problematic, that there's this whole secret, file of things. It's basically the authoritarian takeover. So I think you're exactly right. I think legally these are not viable. But as you mentioned, you have first mover advantage. Frank, you and I, when we were in Quantico and we learned how to shoot guns, action beats reaction, right? That's what we were taught. And I think that's what the Trump administration is always counting on. It's counting on action beating reaction. We do this. We do the PA. I mean, they did this kind of with the Doge stuff, right? We're just going to do it.
They did it.
And then how it took like months for them to be like, oh no, you can't dismantle USAID. And it's like, well, they're gone now. They're fired. Everybody's like, it's over. We're
Right.
done.
Right.
So I think that we need to take a page from how the intelligence community dealt with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What do we do there? We pre-bunked. We had intelligence that this was going to happen. And we went and told the world, here's what's going to happen. This is what Russia's going to try to do. They're going to try to invade Ukraine. This is the excuse they're going to give for it. They're going to say there's mass graves in Ukraine. They're going to say that, Ukraine was the aggressor. And Tony Blinken actually went into the United Nations and gave like these 5 false narratives in advance, which successfully kind of neutralized Russia's ability to really say that. Now they still invaded. Okay, so that's the problem. But it was understood that it was illegitimate from the jump.
Yeah.
We, people like you, things like your show, my platform. I mean, we all, because we're not in control of the government, unfortunately, we can't, get this from on high. We need to put this out there so people are prepared for the narratives that are going to come out, like Venezuela hacked voting machines or whatever.
Yeah. It's almost transparent. You can see this is going to happen. But so let's go with that thread in the remaining few minutes we have. And how does this apply to getting ahead of it in the courts, perhaps ahead of the midterms? Right. I know we've got some great attorneys general. Rob Bonta, California, man, he led the charge to stop, for now, the merger of Paramount and Warner Brothers. It's proactive stuff. But will the judge sit there and say, particularly a federal judge, you're telling me you're afraid that Trump's fixing to get ready to do X, and I don't have a live action in front of me. Like, what is that? Is that an issue?
It is an issue. So my point is that I don't know that we can rely on the courts for this kind of thing. Okay, the action beats reaction is going to win if we're relying only on the courts, because, as you mentioned, the court needs, Trump to overtly do something or try to do something, and then you run into court and you try to get the preliminary injunction, right? But if that thing is the military's out, like seizing voting machines, so I think, Frank, we are at a point, people need to understand this. The courts are not going to save us. This is in our hands. And right now, one of the things that I do think the administration is sensitive to is public pushback. I think one of the reasons they're using this ARTC is because they're getting so much, they're trying to do it secretly, because doing it overtly is creating too much PR problems for them. So they need a big PR problem. They need people in advance of the election, ordinary people saying, don't effing try this.
Yeah. And those people, and preferably those people are Republicans in the House and Senate calling the White House going, hey, I've had enough of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. And it needs to be at all level. I really do think, and listen, what is the, statistics and history show us? Authoritarians actually are defeated by, I'm talking authoritarians that already come to power. It only takes 3.5% of the population to stand up for them to topple.
Right.
They actually don't, they can't, they're very fragile.
Yep.
And that's something that we need to remember, that authoritarians would be authoritarians. They're actually really fragile, even when they're like wielding all of these like PADs and whatever. We need to stand up and make it clear that we are not going to put up with the shit.
Wow, what a great note to end on, because it's empowering for us. We often think this is overwhelming. We don't have a say. There's not enough of us. And yeah, there may be. There may very well be enough of us. And enough Republicans might be seeing the cracks in the armor too now as well. What a great discussion, Asha. Thanks for joining us. Hey, listen, I hope it happens before that, but definitely when you're ready to do some book promotion.
I would love that.
Let's get you back here, and I'm always interested in an author's, process of writing.
Same.
When you're talking to me, you're not writing, and how that all works, and oh my gosh, but I look forward to it. I really do. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yep. All right, folks, that was Asha Rangappa. I hope that I hope you follow her on Substack and the Freedom Academy, and we look forward to her putting out Uncompromised, Activating Your Moral Compass in an Age of Complicity. As I said, if this is an intriguing topic for you, we are going to have an expert from the Brennan Center that really, they study this stuff. And when I say study, I mean, you may have heard me say, the very reason we see glimpses of PADs that are locked up in a safe at the White House is because someone is combing through declassified documents and catching references to a PAD, right? That's cool stuff. We're going to be talking about that on Wednesday on the Frank Figliuzzi Show at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you then. Thanks.